Hello, thanks for joining. I am Alan Boyer with ANA Technology Partner. Today we're going to talk about Symantec Privileged Access Management and its REST APIs and how to manage them via third-party tools to streamline API development and incorporate it into automation tools. The Symantec Privileged Access Management, you can see here I've got displayed. I got the latest release. It is a hardened appliance. It has some access to manage objects that are exposed. One of the first processes that were allowed was a client tool that was basically a jar with a bunch of action items that would be wrapped around for Windows or Linux. This talks to a Java servlet that's within the appliance. This has slowly been being replaced by REST APIs. Two sets of REST APIs that are available. Some are exposed, and there is a Swagger JSON API doc that's available. We'll look at that. You'll see a URL as api.php exposed for some of the APIs, as well as there's some ones known as LDAP external REST APIs, and you'll see those listed as /CSPM/ext/REST. There are internal REST that are not exposed yet, so there is still quite a bit of functionality that has not been fully exposed, and we'll walk through that. If we look within the UI itself, so this is the UI for the PAM solution. If we go to settings, first we'll take a look at configuration. And if we go down to security access, you can enable your REST API as well and any TLS security. And this was the older servlet command line interface. If we go to settings, go to the API doc, this is a Swagger JSON that has a mix of both the API.php REST as well as the LDAP REST one. So if we click on one of these objects, nice pretty colors here with the Swagger JSON, we can see CSPM/ext. If we go down to some of the other objects under device groups, we have API PHP. Now the API doc Swagger JSON is a great tool to get some intro on the functionality that's been exposed. They have a feature where you can do try it out. If it's already authenticated, it'll execute the REST command, and they even give you examples how to pull it out of the curl, and you can leverage that curl to paste into Postman or other tools. Here's a response body of all the objects with its unique identifier and a group name depending on what fields you've asked for. If you do a star, you can see more information. Just show that real quick. So I'm going to fill a star, hit try it out again, and you'll see quite a bit more data for that one object. Some of the ones that are kind of hidden. When the REST are exposed externally, there's quite a bit of functionality that's reduced, so you don't need all the noise, so they do reduce that down. If I go to look at device groups here, you'll see the same objects from the UI viewpoint. Now, these REST processes that are here, while it's useful here, you can pull this all of the curl and you can throw it into a script. It's actually more beneficial to expose these into a third-party development tool, such as Postman or others. I'm actually going to walk through a desktop tool that we can leverage since the Postman Scratchpad's being deprecated. It may be replaced by other tools, but we're just going to go ahead and leverage this other one. So Microsoft provides a platform called Visual Studio Code that other vendors may create open source or their own tools that have some sort of subscription model to be placed in here. So you can do quite a bit of coding activity in here. You can set up a really nice platform to help you share with other people in your group. It could be other business administration teams, or it could be development teams. So your VAs can see this, your technical advisors can see this, and you can share it back and forth. You can export the entire collection out to a JSON format and email it if you need to, if you're not on the cloud platforms. So the tool we're going to actually leverage inside here is for REST is called Thunderclient, and it's actually been built to reside on top of VS Code. You can click over here and get the VS Code, you can see it's coming from the Microsoft Visual Studio Marketplace. If you click install, you can get the latest release. If you want to get a prior release, you can click on version, and you can go click download here. If you want even an earlier release, you can go to change log and see the version numbers there and pick out one that works for you. There's quite a bit of new features. I didn't need access to those. I just stuck with what I currently had, which was version 2.10.0, and I'll showcase this within the tool. So it's a little bit of the history of the Symantec PAM solution, the APIs. Now we're actually going to get into the tool itself. So let me open it up. This here is Microsoft Visual Studio Code. If I go to Help and do About, you can see the latest release version that I have right now. It's 1.82.2. Updated about, looks like updated about 3 weeks ago. The component that's going to manage the rest is called Thunderclient. If I hover over this icon on the far left here, you can see it says Thunderclient, and you can actually click on go through extensions as well, but if it's displayed, it'll list up in here. And I'm going to let's show what version I have. Let's go over here into the ellipse, go to release notes, and you can see which version I actually have. Okay. I want to talk about these three items here and some of the functionality of the collections. So activity is anything you've been doing recently. We won't be doing too much here, except maybe just show you how to import objects via curl. Collections are the actual requests that have been created. There's the ability to import into collections. If I click over here, you can do import from a URL or import from a file or just create a brand new one. You'll see I've got, in this collection here, I've got all the REST commands that were coming from the Swagger JSON. This came in fairly quickly, just implemented by the URL. The API PH REST commands, I actually had to pull these in manually. So I've got quite a bit of those pulled in. So I've got the gets, the puts, the post in here as well. And the odor client, the servlet, by looking at the Java file, was able to actually pull out the servlet URL. And by going through all the possible parameters that were in that file, we can expose that jar file into a curl command or pull it into this tool. Going through this, it looks like a lot of the majority of the functionality has been exposed by the external ones, and if we need to, we could actually leverage internal REST as well. To showcase some of the internal REST, the PAM reports, I've got some authentication that logs in locally, uses the cookie, and I can click on objects here to pull out reports. And in this section, I'm actually using a feature called chaining. So if I click on step 2 here on the pre-run, you can tell I'm telling it to call the authentication first. So step 1 authentication, it calls this one first. And if I click on this one, it's pre-run, calls the second one. So actually I don't have to click on all these, I can just click on this one step and have it run. It'll authenticate and pull back the report. And I had this report here actually export all this data out into a CSV format. One thing for the report, just a minor note, was I had to run this step within 10 seconds. Otherwise, the token was expired by then. So I made myself just a little note, query in 10 seconds. So that's where chaining actually came into play, because it was able to run these other requests rapidly and then run that one within that time period. The other section besides the collections is the environment. So this is where you'll store variables. These variables can be stored in a couple different locations. The only delta between the Thunderclient and Postman is it has just one environment here, and it does get, it's active environment, so it does get cluttered. You can unmask passwords or host names or whatever there. The other items here that are noise, I typically just remove these if they're not needed to, because they'll be replaced on the fly. I do wish there was like a temporary one as well that would keep this one sort of clean. But I'll show you how this environment is referenced. I do For the collections, when I'm running through test case, I actually like to keep the variables in a separate file and call that. And to show that, I've got a JavaScript file that's leveraged by Thunderclient. I have the function defined here just to give it a random useful business name, and you can go ahead and close it, and then you export it as a module, and that allows it to be utilized by Thunderclient. I do have quite a bit of some comments in here just talking about Thunderclient and what I could be setting up as variables or filters. So in this file, I set a lot of variables, just any objects that I'll change rapidly during a test use case. And if I can utilize some of these names as key value pairs, I'll use them down further. So you can see here with the double curly braces, I'm using the app code above for these other variables, and these will be utilized in some of the submissions, and I'll walk through that. All right. If you need to change this file, you can open it in Notepad++ or in here. If you open it within Thunderclient, if you made a change, say I put a space in there, you'll see on the very far upper left is saying that there's one unsaved file. You can go back here and click on this active window and hit Control-S, and it'll save it. So that file is active now. So like, let's change like this value here from M in. Let's make that O. So Control-S. So I've changed that one value. Let's go take a back look at our collections. So I'm going to focus on a demo for vaulting within the PAM solution. And the goal is by doing validation within this tool, Thunderclient or Postman, you can validate when you're working with your business analyst, the technical team developers, that the functionality that you're looking for to solve a use case can be validated here. You can share it. You can do sessions together until you get it down exactly the way you want to. Then once you feel comfortable with that, it can be moved into any other tool or any DevOps type processes. Okay, so let's walk through here. So I'm going to click on Settings for this folder, this collection, and you'll see Options, Headers, Auth, Test, Environment, Pre-running scripts. I want to walk through these. You can set base URL here. You saw that I set it actually as an environment variable, so I'm not leveraging it here. So it was a pre-built environmental variable if I wanted to use that one. Headers, I've got no need to set anything here. Authentication, this will be the external authentication for the REST. If you go back to the appliance, just to showcase that, over here, if I go to credentials, target accounts, when you look at your target accounts have been set up for REST, it'll create an object here. So like for the API one, I've got one here with a little I symbol. You can click on those and it will display the account that you authenticate with and credentials. And you can just copy it and paste it into your other tool. All right. Let's go back over here. For tests, I don't have anything enabled on this upper parent folder. And it does change from a parent to a child object to another object. So I'm at this object level right now. Environment, that points back to the PAM, so all the credentials information I had there. That will then be leveraged for this. So if I hover over it, you can actually see it's green. And on some of these screens, if it's green, it means it's found it, it's populated. If I click under scripts, this is pointing back to that file. So I can choose a file and set it here. And then inside that file, we had a module set. And the pre-run, the pre-request script, I have it pull up that module so we can actually leverage all those variables that we had set. So that's it pretty much from the folder level, what I've got set. One thing to be careful is don't clear cookies on a parent folder. It will cause strange behavior when it has to keep, it wipes out the cookies out every time there's a task. So those are the little gotchas you got to be careful about. Let's go down to the next level here. Make sure there's nothing set here. Just double checking, so nothing's set. All right. Now when we look at the actual task, and I'll walk through these after I do a run, you'll see we'll have authentication set to inherit automatically. If we want to change it, we can. We can modify these, and they're unique. If we change any variables going to be unique, you can see what's going to happen. And you can see if this text like this is white and it's not green, it hasn't picked up the environment yet. So when we do run it, it should catch it and pull it up. So what I'm going to do is just close these right now. Just make sure nothing's left. And I'm going to use a feature here called run all. And what that's going to do is going to go through every single step and create the objects. So I'm going to use a device called vaulted accounts, just something random out there, and have it just go and create target application, create target groups. I'm going to go in and create credential manager groups. I'm going to leverage the default credential manager role, and I'll go ahead and create some a PVV policy, and then I'll create the actual target account, and I'll validate it along the way with additional gets. And if everything's working fine, we'll see it display here. One of the other things I want to show is this section down here for looking at data. So if this was closed, you can actually go back up here to Thunderclient, say show logs. Make sure it's clicked on output, and that the drop down here of all the extensions is clicked on Thunderclient, and clear it out prior. So let's just do a run. I changed just before I run it. I did change this value to AVO since it is something new. So if I do open up over here under applications and type in name type AVO and filter, there should be nothing there. All right, let's run the test. So we're going to run the collection, and we'll let it go through all the steps here. One thing to be careful with the Thunderclient tool, if the tabs are open, if they have been saved, you will get cached results, and it may give you strange behavior. So this run collection was successful for every step. 200 level. I've got complete logs here. I go through. You can click on any of these events as well, and you'll see the response that came back. If there's any headers, those have response headers. Your request headers will be down here in the logs if you need to look at them. And since this actually created those objects, if we go back over here to the tool just to prove it, so if I do filter again, we now have a vaulted account. Click in it. You can see it's been set up, and I've got some strings set there, just random. If I click under target, see accounts, just drop down name, APO, so ABO, ABO. Filter out here. Nope, not the accounts. That's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at the credential manager groups. ABO. We've got the 3 that I had set up. One of the challenges around credential manager groups with the external REST APIs, they're not exposed at this time. So to bypass that issue, we leverage the internal authentication. And what that is down here by step 7, I authenticated into the appliance through normal URL, leveraging cookies, using a local PAM account, and then just leveraging the cookies to all of them. I did, on the pre-run, set clear cookies only on this one request. If I set it down any others, these others would actually fail. All right, so let's walk through the steps one by one so we can see some of the values of the Thunderclient tool here. So let me just close those. It's actually an OP. Let's create another object. We'll save this, Control S. So I am going to click on this one, and let's clear this out so you can see it. Let's hit send, and you will see the objects that were pulled from the variables for the environment for that one, and it should turn green. You can hover over it, and it should populate a value there. So this one right here was a simple get, just to get an existing device. Devices should already pre-exist on the solution. If you have another process automating it, if not, you can have a process that create those devices as they're onboarded. So I've got this one. The goal of this step here was not only to get it, but under the test, I wanted to take this JSON body, and notice that it's in curly braces. This is the JSON output. I'm telling it to grab the JSON, which is, in Thunderclient's terms, this is the entire body, and then parse it out. So dot devices, you can see it's this devices, which is an array, and then grab that first device ID. And I could have had devices array 0 enclose the array and had that as well. But now I have the ID. So if I hover over that, I should see the ID. So 43,001, and it looks like that as well. So what's the purpose of this is so I can now leverage this variable for the next step. So if I go click on the next step, you can see in the query section, I'm utilizing that ID, and I'm utilizing the application name that I had prior set. And every once in a while you may see cache results there. When it runs, it actually will pull it from the file. So right now we had it set to AVP, so that is, and it is showing AVP, so that's good. Let's run this one. This one's another get, just saying let's grab this information. And the intent of this get was to see if an application existed. We didn't want to try to create one that already pre-existed. So when we're doing it through a DevOps process, we wanted to make sure that we're not going to create failure. So let's just do a lot of pre-checks. So this one's going to run, and if it existed, it would have came back with an object. So this one's null, which is exactly what we want. For the next one, we're going to grab the PCPs, the password comp policy. So here I'm just telling it to grab the name, just another get, going to the API PH REST, hit this one, and error code 200, there's the full body. And again, on test, I'm telling it to go ahead and grab the ID. Now notice this one, it doesn't start with a curly brace, it starts with the square brackets, so it's an array. Still JSON, but it's an array. So we tell JSON, grab the first object, and like this. I could take that one actually out because it would be smart enough to pick it up, but this just makes it explicitly for my satisfaction. So now we got the ID of that object. So now I could utilize it. And so we see that with step 2b. Let's go over here to step 3. We're actually going to do a post. So we're doing a post to API PH to devices with the ID that we had and target applications, and send in a JSON bot. So I click query. You can see the query parameter includes that ID of the first step 1 request. And you can leverage other items here to help you. I put this one in here that has no value to actual headers, just to let me know that it did resolve it and I could see it. Authentication is still inherited. So I'm sending the body with some of the generic, some of the stuff that's hard-coded, where I'm making a variable and setting some of the values there. And I'm going to, when I get the information back, I want to store it. Now in this case, it doesn't come back as a pure JSON body. It comes back as just a double quoted integer. So there is a test process here. We can get the text and remove the double quotes and actually store the integer. So if I run this, you can see the integer there. If I hover over this now, we can now see it's got the prior one. It's got cache, but it's got the value there that's going to be set. All right, so now this was step 3. Let's go to step 4. We're going to validate it. We'll hit it. So we're always doing a get, just make sure it's fine. And now let's go back to step 5. We're going to create a dynamic object, group object. And this one has quite a bit of a large body. And you can imagine when you go into the UI, when you get all the filter strings of the host to the devices, it's the same as it would be here. So I've kept it all pretty much defaults with no value for testing. So query, nothing, headers, just basic, inherit all the body, it's the main part. And when we get the value, I am going to store the ID again. All right, let's submit this. So we've created an object. It's a post. So object's been created. We got an ID. We store that ID, and we'll still see it pop up late here. So again, you gotta be careful about anything that shows up as a cache there. All right, step 6. I'm gonna validate the new test groups. So we click this, and we prove to ourselves the object was created. So we could go back in the UI and show that the target group was actually created. So that was 6A. Let's go to, now we need to manage the credential manager groups, are also known as PA user groups. And unfortunately, they're not exposed externally yet. So we're going to use the internal authentication to an account that has limited access to manage those. So you play with some of your privileges to get this just right. So we're going to authenticate first. This will store the information in the cookie. The important part about the internal REST is to make sure that the headers are set. There is the cross-site referral forgery challenge you have to worry about, and it's enforced by making sure the referrer ID and the origin are set, primarily referrer. And the other values are have some value, but they're not really necessary during our testing we saw. So we're going to submit authentication, and as a pre-run, we're just clearing the cookie just for this one object. So let's hit send. We should just get back to status success. And if we go down here to the bottom, we can see what's been sent over to it. We can actually see our credentials just because it's doing it inside this tool. We had it exposed as part of the headers there. So let's now go to, we're going to do a get of the actual role that will be attached to the CM group object. So let's go grab this one. So we've grabbed it. Under test, we stored the ID, and we also stored the name just to have it available. If you go down to the list here, you can see the IDs there. In the internal REST, you may notice that there's quite a bit more data, and there you can see there's an XML body that's also inside this JSON object that you could filter on, but you notice that when external APIs are created, it's usually a subset of what's here. All right, so that was step 7C1. Let's do step and actually do a post, and this is the internal, and we're going to create this object. So let's create it. So it's been created, and now let's validate it. So we're doing validation, prove that we have access to it and we see it. All right. So now let's do the other CM groups. We're actually going to create 3 of them. So the first one was called VS Approvers. This one's called Limited Admins. So let's get the role. Let's create the CM group. So we create it successfully. Let's validate it. It came back successfully there. Let's create the other one. So that was step E1. Let's actually do the post. Create that object. And we'll validate that one as well. Okay, so that whole section 7 was really my internal REST API. Now I step back here to step 8. You'll see it's using API PH. And there are some CM group objects requests that have been exposed, but typically it's just a search. It's not actually doing a creation. So we had actually go in to use the internal REST API to do creation of the objects or updates if we want to, but in the until those are on the roadmap to be exposed, they just haven't been done yet at this time. So we're just going to go ahead and validate these objects using the external REST just since we can. And as a test, I'm going to go ahead and just capture that ID because I want 3 different IDs. So this one's going to grab the object. So if I click on that one, again, notice it's the square brackets. So the curly braces first, so it's an array. So we got 0, grab that ID, and I'm just going to store it in Credential Manager Group 1. And then in this one, I'm going to store it in Credential Manager Group 2. You can see that 2 right there under that test. And then this one down here, you can see I'm going to store that in 3. So let's store those 3 values since they are 3 separate Credential Manager groups. I get that value, then I can now use it for the next objects. So now we're down here in step 9A. I'm going to create a PVP policy with approval. And I'll just walk through the objects. You can see not really much for the queries, just order that was something I captured, the headers. If I hover over that, you see it still is the external REST, so that's fine. The refer and all of them didn't really enforce that much when you're doing the external one. I noticed authentication is still inherited. Here's the body. You can see it's fairly long. We got the approver IDs, we got the PVP ID, everything else is defaults. The test here, of course, again, capturing the ID. Since the PAM unique identifier, we can't just leverage the name, we have to use the identifier. So we'll just hit submit. That's a post, so it was successful to 100 level. And you can see quite a bit of data here, especially with all the service desk ticket systems that are out there. There's 3 different types out there. So it's kind of bloated, but we're just looking for the ID, right? And that was step 9A1. Let's go to B. Let's validate that we actually created it successfully. And here you can see it's a subset, quite a bit less information. Even though we had field star, we're only seeing a subset of all that data. All right, so let's go now to jump down here to jump. Step 2, we're going to actually create the target account for the app ID. Now I want to walk through this one. We got the device ID, we got the application ID, we got the body of the target account that we set, some random information. Like you have a password here, it could be random, whatever is needed to. The PVP policy that we created, and it can be synchronized. This is typically could be true or false, these TRFs. I'm actually going to change this value and do update on. I have a little bit later with a put just to showcase it. And again, we get an integer with double quotes. We're just going to remove the double quotes and store it. Let's hit send. So 9200, so it's been sent. Let's validate that we actually created the account correctly. So we got the ID, this value, and the account ID. So hit send. And we got the current date stamp, got the ID, any information about it as well. And again, field star, so this is the information you get from that request. Now we've got a interesting thing. Let's just do a put. We're going to actually do an update. So I've got the word string update here, and I'm changed synchronized to F. So just show you got the device application ID as part of the URL up there. And note in the URL it's a single curly brace, not double, like the variables here. So let's click on the body. So we're going to change it with the updates. Now I'm not need to get any tests come back from this one. So let's hit submit. It was successful. Interesting, just return the ID again. And then down here we're going to do a get. And we'll see the word update right there. And we'll see synchronize as now false. So that was it pretty much from that if you put it in that use case. Now, when you want to pull data in from into your collections, again, you have the ability to do imports from URL or something. But another nice feature that Postman and Thunderclient have is the ability to import from curl. So you got 2 ways to do this. You can click on activity and say import curl here. So if I go to a browser and say I want to create say I want to create a device group, right? Let's actually make it something simple. Let's create a manager group. So any kind of random name. We'll grab an existing role. Doesn't matter. Let's hit the F12 key so you can see this. And if I hit OK, and it submitted it. If we go to, you can see where these DCs are, timestamps are. You see this was the post. If I look at these, I'm going to take this post, I'm going to right click and go to copy and grab curl bash. And if I do that, I can go back over to our tool. Let's say import curl, and just Control V, paste it in, and you'll see it populate over here. And there's the information that I did. And there's nothing that says I just can't do another send to it, and it'll say it's already created. But if I put a 2 here or something like that, hit send, and create another object. The other way to do import with the same thing with the curl, you can do it. You can go to Postman, and let's actually, I think you can go to settings, keyboard shortcuts, type in curl, and you'll see that Thunderclient has a shortcut called Control U. So if I do Control U, if we clear these out, let's clear activity just to make it easier. Let's do Control U again. Yep, so it did put it there. It looks like that was my post. So if I go back over here, oh, I grabbed the post again. That's what it was. Grab the curl get and Control U. So there's the get, and I can send that over, and we can see the data. And once I'm happy with that get, I can now say save to a collection, and so I can save to an existing one. So this allows us to expand from a browser to Postman or Thunderclient and keep expanding our collections for DevOps. And that concludes our session. So thank you very much for watching, and keep an eye out for additional blog entries.